My name's Ben. It's Andre. He'll be up here in a second. And we're going to talk about conversational artificial intelligence. And this is basically what we're going to go over here today. I just want to give you a quick rundown so you kind of know what's happening. So Andre's going to come up here and kind of give you some background on SAS, in case you're not familiar with us. And I'm going to come back and actually talk about an architecture that we're working on to actually build chatbots within SAS. And I'm going to go through the architecture of that, and then we'll see a demo of actually how to do that and see a chatbot in action. But I'm going to turn it over, like I said, to Andre right now, tell you all about SAS.
All right, thanks, Ben. So how many people have heard of SAS before? It's a large majority. How many people are actively using SAS wherever you currently work? 1, 2, 3. Okay, cool. Yeah, so I wanted to talk a little bit about SAS and just give some quick background. SAS has a product called VIA, which is this unified analytics platform, basically. So you go from data to your ingesting, accessing, cleaning, applying governance to that data, all the way to model deployment. So think of the entire analytics lifecycle, and SAS provides a platform that you can do all of that in a single space. And being that it's in a single space, it also allows to scale across any type of user. So whether it's like a business analyst, data scientist, developer, regardless of the needs, SAS makes it easy for any one of those people, regardless of skill set, to kind of come in, plug in, add value, and have this guided analytics experience. And then furthermore, when working within SAS, it's maybe a little bit different than what some of us are used to. When I was in grad school, we looked at SAS as a certain way, that it was kind of its own thing, and then everything else was happening on the side, like open source. But now, SAS has become really open to all of the other open source languages like R and Python, and Ben's going to do a demo in Spark in SAS. So it's catering to all of the users, regardless of skill set, and then across the entire data analytics lifecycle, but then also to any language, or pretty much the popular open source languages that most of us are familiar with in terms of building and deploying these models. And then these are just a handful of things that it can do. So regardless of the task, when I recently just started at SAS, so 4 months ago, and asked about like my experience with SAS. Prior to coming to SAS, I always knew SAS as the forecasting company. If you wanted to do a granular, low granularity forecast, that SAS was the people to do it. And but there are so many different tools that SAS offers, from deep learning to machine learning to the forecasting. All of that is available in SAS in that unified tool. So today, specifically, we're going to be talking about NLP, natural language processing, which is basically just, some people view it as a branch of AI that the computer interprets, analyzes, and manipulates human language. And specifically, we'll talk and go into more of like the NLU and NLG, which is natural language understanding and then natural language generation. Think of the understanding piece as the computer essentially reading in, whether that's text-to-speech or speech recognition, where it's actually taking unstructured data and understanding what that is. And then generation is taking that unstructured data, applying something, and then generating text back or speech back. There's common occurrences of this that we use daily, whether it's through your iPhones or Android devices, Alexa, Google Home, all that stuff is using this NLU or NLG in the background. And then because we're going to be talking about chatbots, the business benefits of it, and some of these are pretty obvious, right? So the overhead cost of having a chatbot versus a human in place is pretty significant. And then in terms of like speed and handling, all of that fits into this operational efficiency. Availability, so a robot doesn't sleep, doesn't eat, doesn't nag, so it's always available. And then global reach, just saw a great presentation on different languages with text. You could essentially train these bots to do multi-languages and scale globally. So just some quick use cases here with looking at Siri, smart search, embedded within machine learning, Also call steering and IRV, I'm sure we've all had this when we make a phone call and we get routed to a specific department within customer service through the NLP services that they're providing. And then chatbots, so some use cases. So order fulfillment, Q&A, so you have a question, it can respond to that. That's like your very low level, not super intelligent, as we heard in our keynote form of chatbot. There's this woe bot, therapy bot, so people that are maybe at risk or at depression or suicide watch, that they could quickly contact a chatbot 24/7 and be able to speak to somebody or artificial intelligence and kind of talk their problems through and alleviate some of those issues. Law bot, health bot, and then in retail systems, your recommendation engine, maybe like your assistant that we've used before. So all of those are use cases and kind of business benefits, but Ben is going to come up and actually show the fun stuff. We'll actually demo a bot and talk about that. So thanks.
Thank you, Andre. So I wanted to put this tweet up here for one of the points actually Andre pointed out about SAS Viya. The idea that what we're trying to do is, yes, we have a very large analytics platform. What we want to do is we actually want to make it open so people can bring in other tools that they're already using. This is a tweet from Jared Peterson. He's actually one of the managers inside of our AI cognitive group. And a lot of the NLG and NLU stuff that I showed today is actually coming from his group. And what he points out here is one of the reasons we're actually looking at chatbots is the ability to actually take conversation and tap into analytics to answer questions and make it more accessible to people, right? So we might be, coming to all these presentations, seeing a lot of great stuff you can do with data science and a lot of models you can create, but a lot of times it's hard to get, say, your business user to interact directly with that. Well, what we're looking for in chatbots is to actually allow that to happen by putting natural language in front of it. And because of the openness of SAS Viya platform, you can do that modeling in whatever language makes sense to you, and then bring it in and use our natural language processing and natural language generation to actually create that chatbot. So what I'm going to do is, like I said, first of all, talk about some of the architecture we're working on right now. So this is kind of the flow that happens every time you talk to our chatbot. So we have over here on the left, we got the user input. Right, so that could be either text or it could actually be voice. Now what we do with voice is SAS actually has a service that's coming out soon that's going to allow us to do voice to text. Most of the demos we've done so far have actually been on device though. You pull out your iPhone and you actually talk to it. It's actually doing the voice to text on the device. So everything we have beyond that purple square is actually going to be text. So we're going to be working with text directly. So a user talks to some sort of chatbot application, and then it flows into what we call the bot logic. And what we try to do inside this bot logic is actually allow our users to create different conversations. And we'll see this in the demo in a little bit. But you create these conversations that are trying to fulfill some sort of intent that the user has. Right? So they use natural language to ask you to do something or ask you a question, and then you have logic in there of how you're actually going to deal with that. Now, to understand what they're asking, we actually have to use the natural language understanding service, which is up above. Now, because you're in the middle of, or potentially in the middle of a conversation, there's context that needs to come along when we go into that natural language understanding, right? So if I just said that I wanted to do something, if you only took that one sentence, you may miss the context of what I was talking about. It might have been building on the conversation that we've been having, so we want to have that context when we feed it into natural language understanding. So we feed your text into the natural language understanding, plus the context of what you've already said in the conversation, and it comes back with the intent that you're trying to reach. We go into the bot logic and say, okay, well, this is the conversation they're in, this is what they're trying to do, what's the next step? Then we come to that red box. Well, do we have enough information to actually do what they've asked for? Right, so if you've asked a very vague question and actually need some more specific information, then we might follow up in the chatbot with a couple of additional questions so we can get that information to then go on to fulfillment. Fulfillment being what's actually on this slide called actions. And this is the part that I was talking about earlier that we're really excited about. Because there's a lot of stuff happening before this, a lot of natural language understanding, and afterwards we'll do natural language generation. But these actions are really what we're trying to open up to everyone. That's where your analytics are. Right? That's where you have the model that you want people to interact with, but they can't do it directly because they may not understand how to interact with it. They may not understand which model to use at which time. but they understand how to say it, right? They understand how to convey the idea using natural language. And so now you can actually hook those up to your, hook them up through this as actions, right? So what I'm going to show in a minute is actually how I put in some really simple Spark code that actually runs inside my chatbot. So as I talk to it, it's going off and running really simple Spark SQL queries. We also, of course, do SAS codes you can do in there. We'll let you call out to other third-party web services or even more web services within the SAS platform. Right, so you spend a lot of time, you got data scientists working a lot on that very end part, and now we've put natural language in front of it so it's more accessible to more people. All right, so we go in and we run your model or your simple SQL query, which is what I'm going to show in a minute. And the information that comes back out, we don't want to just dump out some numbers to the screen in most of these cases. Right, so that's where we go through natural language generation. Inside of our natural language generation service, what we're actually doing is we're running a template service that's actually based on velocity. And inside of there, what we allow you to do is we allow you to bring in that data that came from the fulfillment, run it through a velocity template, and create yourself some sentences. But one of the things that we realized when we did this was, well, when you're trying to create natural language directly from data, there are issues that come up that you do in your head immediately, but it's very hard for us to do inside of a generic service like this. For example, noun-verb agreement. Right, as you look at your data, you might have asked a question that returned, one object, or might have returned 10 objects. Right, I quickly switched between, one object and 10 objects, but we have to do that in there as well. And so we provide tools inside that natural language generation service that allow you to do that. Right, so you do noun verb agreement, you can do singular plural. We also convert numbers from, ordinal to nominal and back and forth depending on what you want to actually show back to the user. Again, it might make more sense to say the first one, the second one, the third one than it is to say the oneth, the tooth, the third, or the threeth, I guess is what that would be. Right, so you want it actually to come back out sounding like natural language so people are more understanding of what you're trying to convey. And so we have those tools inside the natural language generation service that allow you to do that. And then once that happens, obviously, we send back the result to the application for the user to then continue interacting with it. And we go through this cycle over and over again as you interact with the bot. And depending on how you're moving throughout the conversations, we're going to be growing and shrinking your context. Right? So what we do is we think of an entire dialogue you might have with a bot as being multiple conversations put together. Within a conversation, you build context. When you're done with that conversation, you might clear some of that context and start another conversation. And so you can actually build that context as you go, remembering what parts make sense and forgetting what parts you don't need, and then have more of a rich dialogue. So this, like I said, happens every time we go through it. And now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to switch over and show how we do that, how we actually build those pieces, and then we'll interact with a quick bot at the end. So this is the new interface that we're working on right now that's going to allow us to build chatbots and a couple other pieces. So what it actually shows is it shows chatbots. So I've got a couple of them here. We also have domains. Now, what we have to do to actually do the natural language understanding is we have to create these domains so we understand what the intents are that the user is trying to say and how you want to actually interact with them. So actually, that's where I'm going to start. So I'm going to open up this domain here. And so if you've done any chatbot work in some other frameworks, some of this stuff might make a lot of sense. I'm going to click down on, oh, no, let's do description. So what am I looking at here? So inside of my domain, I can create intents, right? This is the actual level where you're going to want your chatbot to interact, right? So these are different types of things that you want someone to be able to ask, and you actually answer back. So the chatbot we're looking at here is actually one that's about registering for classes on a training website, right? So SAS has a nice training website, and so we've kind of embedded a chatbot on top of that to allow you to register for a class. So one of the things you might ask about a class is its description, right? So what I've done in here is I've just created a couple of little utterances about, let's see, I've got 3 of them here. I want more information about exploring data class, tell me more about the exploring data class, and then just the name of a class, right? So we kind of have a default fallback of somebody just types in the name of a class. We're going to try to actually show you the description of that class and help you out. So I can come in here and add another one. So let's see. For some reason I don't have describe the exploring data class. So I can type that in and send it off to the engine, and it's going to go and it's going to parse it and try to figure out the parts inside that sentence that it already knows about. In this case, it actually found all the good bits that I wanted. which is nice for a demo, right? So it figured out I was talking about describing, which it says is, hey, that's the describe entity. I've got exploring data, that's the name of a class, and then a class qualifier just out there at the end in case I needed more information about what I was talking about. So now I can put this into my model, and when somebody comes in and says, describe the exploring data class, I'm going to understand, it's going to map back to this intent, and then I can go and run fulfillment and different pieces off of that. So inside this thing, we can create intents. We've got the smaller pieces that have been shown here, the entities themselves. And so here's some topics that we have, things like that. Right now, we're doing very simple entity matching. In the future, we're actually going to allow you to load all the entities on the fly at runtime, which is a really nice thing that we're doing in NLU. Because this is a great example, right? These are all the topics that I typed in for this particular case, but the training classes available at SAS change every single day. There's no way I can keep up with that, coming in here and typing them in every single day. So we're actually going to add the ability for you to load those at runtime directly from the data itself. So the model will get trained on a couple of samples, like these 4, for example, and then at runtime, it's actually going to load the real list, and so you can go and find any class that might be offered at that time. So I've created this domain that's going to allow me to talk about these different intents. So the next thing I need to do is actually create a bot, or in this case, I've already created a bot. So like I said before, we break down bots into that larger dialogue that we have into smaller conversations. So this first conversation is asking about how long a class is. It's a very simple conversation, right? I just want to know how long a class is. But you can imagine that in the middle of a dialogue, right? I found a class, I'm thinking about registering for it, I found out what the price is, and then I want to ask how long it is, right? But all those other bits that I talked about are different conversations, and there's no reason I have to have them in any particular order. So instead, what we do is to break it down into very small units, so that as the user goes through it, we can be bouncing around between all these different conversations. And it's up to the user to kind of figure out which one they want to ask about next. But we've modeled it this way, which allows us to handle those jumps. So it's a pretty simple thing. Like I said, so it's using this intent of class length. Inside of it, it's got this required parameter of class name. So if the user hasn't said the class name to this point, it's not in their context, we'll go and we'll actually prompt them back. That was that red box on the diagram we had before. And it'll show, or it'll ask them, what class do you care about? And then it's going to come down and run some really simple Spark SQL here. This is obviously a really simple example, but the idea is the same whether you're running a very simple model, or in this case, a very simple query, or whether you're running something very complex, right? At this point, this is where you can put in the smarts that you've been working on as a data scientist, right? So the natural language part is being done before and below, and in the middle you get to add in those actions I was talking about before. So this is where you can expose some model that you might have already deployed somewhere else, call it directly, get the answer back, and then flow the data into the next node. In this case, like I said, I'm just doing some Spark SQL to pull, let's see, the length from my class table, right? And then it flows into the next node where it's a very simple little template that we have here. I'm going to look into my data and see if I have the actual length. And if I do, I might tell you what it is and how long it is, or what the unit is, rather. And if I don't, I'll tell you, I'm sorry, I don't know how long that class is. For some reason, we have classes in our data that don't have links on them. I'm not really sure why. I haven't followed up with the actual people who own the data to ask why we have classes you can register for, but we don't tell you how long they're going to last. So I ran into that use case and just added this little if check in here to make sure that's what I'm going to get out. So like I said, we allow you to do, back up here in this, what we call a fulfillment node, we allow you to do a lot of different things. So I've added Spark code at this point, but we have a whole bunch of other pieces you can do. You can call directly to a SAS report if you have that. You want to pull the data out from there. You want to run some SAS code, that's there. You want to go to some SAS service or some external web service. All those are in there. Allowing you to go and get the answer wherever it exists. Again, that openness of letting you go out and get the stuff that you need. All right, so let's actually see this chatbot in action. So here it is. Everybody's familiar with going to a website and seeing a little window pop up on the right or someplace like that. It says, hey, don't you want to chat? So I've kind of faked that up here on our actual training website, and that's my bot over there on the right. So I'm going to try to actually register for a class and see how that goes, assuming the network cooperates. So let's see. I'm interested in, classes about visual analytics. All right, so it's taken that it's going into the bot logic to figure out where I was, what my context was. I didn't actually have any at that point. It went up to the NLU, figured out what my intent was, said, oh, this guy's looking to, he's asking about a topic. Visual analytics happens to be a topic for us. So now it's going to go off, run that fulfillment, and pull back this response. So there's 63 classes that we do. Visual analytics is a really big product for us, one of our flagships. It's not surprising there are that many classes available. And then it gave me 3 possible options. Now this is where you could plug in maybe like recommendation engine or something like that, right? The ones I put here are just kind of randomly pulled out of here's some 3 ones that you might be interested in. But obviously you could do a lot smarter things, right, in that action node. Go out, run a recommendation on who this person is, what they've talked about before, and pull back the actual classes you might care about. You could also do popularity-based ones and things like that. So let's see, it gave me 3 of them. And let me see if I can get some more information. Oh, okay, the second one here is exploring data with SAS Visual Analytics. So let me try to get the description for that one. So tell me more about the exploring data class. Now, that was that one we saw before. Tell me more was one of those utterances inside that intent for the description of that class. I've given it a class name, so it didn't ask me about that, but I'm building that context now. So now I've created a context of I've asked it about a specific class. So that context is now inside of my dialogue, and we'll go on to all the other conversations that I'm interested in. So let's see if that works. So it tells me that it's about Visual Analytics Explorer, and it's using the SAS Laser Analytics server. Okay. And let's see, where is that class offered? So this again is where context comes in, right? So I said that class. It didn't ask me which one I was talking about because I'd already identified context of that exploring data class. If I hadn't, it would have prompted me and asked, well, which one are you talking about? I'm not sure, there's some ambiguity, help me out. But in this case, it was like, oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. Let me go run that little query to figure out where that class is offered. This class happens to be offered on the web and in Cary. Well, I'm based in Cary, so I'll see when it's actually offered. So when is it offered? Oops. In Cary. Again, building that context. Now I've got the name of a class. Now I've got a location, which is actually Cary. So that's enough information for it to drill all the way down to a specific class. It happens to be offered on the 20th of June. And so, well, then I'd like to register for that class. So how do I register for that class? Right, so pretty simple. It says, well, click this link and I'll add it to your cart. So what we've shown here is kind of a really quick and easy idea of how these chatbots can work. I mean, there's a lot of different examples. Andre went through a couple of them where you can get a lot more complex, but the concepts behind it, the building of those small conversations, the creating of that model are all the same. And so that's what we wanted to show here is you can go in and quickly do that and build something really quick and easy. You can get out to whatever resources you need through that actions node or fulfillment node. Run whatever model exists, whatever queries you want to against the data that exists, and build up something that makes sense for you. And this one, I get the question every so often about, well, this one doesn't really drive me to register for that class. I have to drive the conversation versus the bot driving the conversation. That's a choice also, right? You're able to actually program this bot any way you would like to. I happen to not be, pushing a class, right? After maybe that second or third question, I could have already had links in there about add this one to your cart, and add one to your cart. That's just your choice, right? And that's the flexibility we're trying to give you. Come in here, use the tools that are going to deal with the natural language stuff for you, that are going to deal with you connecting to those other pieces, the analytics that you already have, and then build the bot that actually makes sense for you and your use case. So all the stuff that we've shown today, we're hoping to have out by the end of the year. It's all very new. We're working on it as we speak, but we're pretty excited about it, and we think it's a good add to the SAS Viya platform. Are there any questions? Oops. No? Well, I wanted to say I appreciate everybody sticking around. I know it's really late. Everyone wants to get out of here, and we're all tired, but thanks for coming.